Hi guys, I'm officially back on YouTube. I haven't done a YouTube video in such a long time. Back to making long form content about South Asian struggles, living with in-laws and generational trauma, which is what this video just so happens to be about. Now, bit of a disclaimer, I do not advocate for living with in-laws and I don't advocate against living with in-laws. My content is for those of you who are in that experience, or you're about to go into that experience, or you've just gotten out of that experience. If it was down to me, I would want everybody to have their own homes, mother-in-law separate, daughter-in-law separate. Deep down, I believe that's the best way to live. Today we're going to talk about mother-in-laws, specifically the trauma our mother-in-laws, not just mother-in-laws, but our mothers, grandmothers have been through. I think it's really important to understand what our elders have been through because number one, once you understand what they've been through, you can kind of look at the trauma that they might unknowingly inflict upon you on a different lens, and so you might be able to stand up for yourself, or maybe even find ways to stop things before it gets to a point of, domestic abuse. I find a lot of the times though, when mothers have daughters, they don't really open up to them about their own abuse and what they've been through from their in-laws. I feel like when you reach a certain stage after moving on from it, you tend to disassociate and you tend to just like bury the trauma and you don't really want to talk about it. So a lot of girls don't really know what their mothers have been through. Maybe even their mothers have accepted that trauma and think that what happened to them was the right thing as well. And so they won't ever speak about it as a negative experience. They may only speak about it positively. But whatever it is trauma, and it's up to us to be aware of what it is and how it might impact us and generations after us. If I was to talk about every single thing our mother-in-laws slash mothers have been through at the hands of their in-laws, I would be here all day. So we're gonna keep it a few. And if I have to do more videos about this, I can. So first thing is not allowing the daughter-in-law to spend private time with her husband, aka the mother-in-law's son. Now, this was a really common thing back in the day. Mother-in-law would make the daughter-in-law rise at 4 a.m. and then she wouldn't go to bed until past midnight. She would be up all day doing chores. The mother-in-law would give her random things to do. Sometimes it wasn't even things that needed to be done. The mother-in-law would just cook these, demands, massage my feet, wash my hair, can you iron my clothes, just to keep the daughter-in-law occupied. So the mother-in-law was able to successfully separate her from her son as much as possible. Now, why did they do this? I don't know. I don't know what would possess a woman to want to keep her son out of his marriage. Isn't it a good thing, a positive thing, if your son is procreating and expanding his lineage, if your son is happily spending time with his wife? There's nothing wrong with that, but for some reason a lot of mother-in-laws felt like it was their duty to control how often the daughter-in-law could be around their son. So a lot of the times these mother-in-laws, they couldn't spend time with their husbands. They were always occupied, or their husbands were always occupied with family matters. There was always something the husband was needed at. The husband was working, sometimes working in a field. It was all just very, very difficult. Oftentimes, mother-in-laws would be spying on a newlywed couple. She would want to sleep over in the same room as a newlywed couple. They weren't allowed to spend any private time with each other. If they was spend time with each other, it would be amongst other family members. They were not allowed to hold hands, no PDA. And there were consequences for this to the daughter-in-law. Daughter-in-laws would experience domestic violence, abuse. They would be beat up. Their food could be taken away from them. They could be locked up, confined. All of these different tactics were used to punish daughter-in-laws back in the day. Things that if our mother-in-laws ever dared do to us, there would be police at the door if our mother-in-laws ever did anything like this to us. So yeah, but these poor women, they got married so young. They literally went from one mom and dad to a different mom and dad, and now they had to experienced this ill treatment at the hands of a woman who just from day one did not like her daughter. This, if you can imagine, is very traumatic and will definitely come back down the food chain. And it will impact, it has the potential to impact daughter-in-laws of today. How many times have you had a mother-in-law who just wants to join in when you're both going on a date? How many mother-in-laws have wanted to third wheel on the newlyweds honeymoon? How many mother-in-laws spy on their son and daughter-in-laws when they are in their own rooms? I have seen and heard so many stories where mother-in-laws would set up cameras sometimes, or they would be opening the door and peeking through the hole, you know, just to see what they were doing. Sometimes even now, mother-in-laws want to sleep in the same bed as their son and daughter-in-laws. When you're a couple and you're in the living room and your mother-in-law's there or your father-in-law's there, it can feel uncomfortable as a couple to just, you know, talk about things you might want to talk about. You might want to ask each other how your day was. You might want to hold hands. You might want to do some stuff to each other, and you can't really do that around other people, obviously. So you might want to excuse yourselves to go to your own rooms. Well, this can be difficult because, you know, mother-in-law might seem upset or might feel hurt. You see this nowadays quite often. It's very common where the son, out of fear of hurting his mom's feelings, would rather spend the evening in the living room with his mom than spend the evening in the bedroom with his wife. And a lot of wives who live with in-laws are just left scrolling on their phone in their beds next to their sleeping children or just by themselves, and it's all too common, you know. Before it even becomes an issue, because it can become an issue, it's really important to kind of put your foot down. Putting your foot down and just setting boundaries from the get-go about couple time is really important. Eventually what will happen is you guys will end up having kids, and your kid will probably not want to sleep at night. And so everyone in the living room is not a bad idea. Your babies can play around in the sitting room, and you guys can spend time, you know, on your phones or doing whatever you want. But yeah, in the beginning, it's really important to kind of create those boundaries, because you are married to your husband and your husband is married to you. You're both together in this union, and it's not you, your husband, and your mother-in-law. It's just you and your husband. But for many of our mother-in-laws and mums, it has always been the mother-in-law and then the husband. It has been this threesome type of situation. Sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not okay. So yeah, another thing that our mums went through, there's actually a space in Indian jails for these types of women, and that is problems and the issues associated with dowry. Now, in South Asian culture, the girl's side gives money to the man's side as a form of payment, which is a dowry. And this is often given as a sort of payment for, you know, taking the bride off the hands of the father. And there have been a lot of issues, dilemmas associated with the dowry since the beginning of time in South Asian culture. And it's always around bride's side not paying enough dowry, and so the groom's side is really upset about this, and it's mind-boggling to me, but actually this is still an issue nowadays, and I'll get into why it's an issue. The groom side is upset, and so because of that they treat the daughter-in-law badly because her family did not provide enough dowry. Now, this dowry is used for household things. Usually it's used for, you know, improving the life of the joint family. But there have been lots of deaths and a lot of abuse, even women doing jail time in relation to disputes about dowry. Our grandmas, our moms went through this. Oftentimes their families would give so much money and would give furniture, would give household items. They would be gifting a lot of gifts to the groom side, and the groom side would fully take advantage of it. They would, you know, be spending all of that, and then they would have the audacity to then come and say, this is not enough. You didn't give us enough, you know, you should have given us more. The mother-in-law will always be like, this sari your mom got me was so cheap, or this, you know, cooker that you brought for the house is so cheap. Like, how can your family give us such a cheap item. Some of us South Asians are now Muslims, you know, and we believe in the dowry that the husband gives to the wife, okay, which is the mahr. So the mahr has now taken over, but nowadays the bride paying the husband dowry exists in a much more subtle and nuanced way, and that is in where it is culturally accepted that the bride's family provide household goods such as furniture, dinnerware, cutlery, even in some cases paying for household renovations. It's something that is not done out of requirement, it's just done out of as a cultural norm. Some families will outright ask for money when discussing mahr requirements. So when discussing mahr requirements, they will come out and they will ask the wife for funds to do up the house or for funds to buy furniture for their room. They'll be like, oh, it's our room and you know, you can help decorate it, but you have to pay for everything. You have to pay for the furniture, you have to pay for the beds, whatever you want to do, you pay for. But it's almost as though this thing that we thought we eradicated because we all converted to Islam has now come back again and is now a thing. You know, it's now a cultural expectation. It's almost as though the bride paying the groom dowry never really went away, and it's still a thing, but it's more subtle. So my advice to that is, if anybody ever asks you, like your in-laws, mother-in-law, even your husband, before you get married, for money to do up the house when discussing mahr, say no. Okay, you are not obligated to give any type of money to your husband before you get married or his family. That's not a requirement by Islam. You can, however, if you feel like you want to contribute to the household because you live there and you know it's a nice thing to do, because you know sometimes maybe you want to be a nice daughter and then you want to contribute. My advice is, if you want to contribute, ask for more mahr than you would like. Okay, overshoot your mahr. And then when the guy comes back to you asking you for money to do up the house, that amount that you overshooted, you can give that back. And he can use that for the furniture, for the household appliances, for the renovations. If, however, you don't want to contribute because it's not your house and you plan on moving out, because a lot of the times what tends to happen is women will buy and pay for furniture and household appliances, and then when they move out, they are not meant to take any of it with them. It stays with the in-laws. So if you don't want to contribute anything because you know you're going to move out and there's no point because you're not allowed to take any of it with you, don't ask for mahr and don't give any mahr. I know that sounds crazy, like, oh, why should I put away my rights? I'm telling you, sometimes mahr in the South Asian culture, even like the whole concept of mahr, really complicates things because there's so many things from the previous culture that are still in our current. In my opinion, you don't give any, you don't get any. If you want to give dowry to the husband, ask for a big dowry to start with. And my opinion, that's the best way to go. Ask for a lot and then give some of it back. In some cases, if your in-laws are really nice and they are not going to do the whole generational trauma thing, because you know some mother-in-laws they've done a lot of healing, and not all mother-in-laws and not all in-laws are bad people, and not all of them will do these things to their daughter-in-laws, you know, but some of them do. Okay, and if they're truly respectable, good people, they will allow you to take all of your belongings with you into your new home because it's your things and you paid for them. But I find sometimes that's not the case. They will say, oh, it's still your room. Okay, you still have a room here with us. You can come back at any time. All your stuff is still here. They'll often come to you with that excuse. Or what you will see is they'll say it's your room, and then the next beau that comes in, the next daughter-in-law that comes in, that's her room now. So you've basically, your money that your parents gave to you has been spent on the next daughter-in-law, which is, I know, ridiculous, right? But that's what tends to happen. That's how this generational trauma comes back out and rears its ugly head. Okay, yeah, mother-in-law was also a daughter-in-law once. And can we talk about how so much of the time our mothers and mother-in-laws did so much work, so much housework. The household chores back in the day were mostly done by the daughter-in-law. The house was managed by the daughter-in-law. The childcare was managed by the daughter-in-law. It was all the responsibility of the daughter-in-law. And back then, there was no such thing as screen time. Okay, back then there was no such thing as washing machines. There was no such thing as onion choppers, blenders, vacuums. You know, everyone did everything by hand. When it came to cooking big feasts for the family, which is what a lot of the daughter-in-laws would do as well, because there wasn't enough available cookers, many of them would set up fires outside and cook in the outdoors. They'd be cooking all day, sweating from the smoke, spending hours and hours cooking everything from scratch, washing clothes by hand. And when you think of all the clothes that there are, and you know how many people that would live in the house, washing clothes and drying clothes, just the act itself would take hours and hours and hours of time. Women back then did so much. They would work from sunrise well into sunset. Even towards the end of the day, they're still working, doing work. And this is something our mothers had to do. There was no question about it. Like, if you didn't do it, you would get in trouble. And back then, trouble wasn't just being told up. Back then, trouble was you would get hit. You know, back then, trouble was you would have no food, nothing to eat. You would be confined. You know, there are some really harsh abuse carried out to women for not following the rules, for not, you know, helping out, not cooking, not cleaning, not doing what was required of them. If you were sick, you weren't allowed to be sick. There's no such thing as being sick. Being sick or tired was an excuse. Oftentimes, your pain, if you had any pain or any issues, was ignored. You know, there was a lot of medical abuse as well. You just had to suck it up and do what was expected of you back then. Nowadays, we are so lucky, we have so many appliances, alhamdulillah. We have vacuum cleaners, washing machines, but then again, it's still work, and it's still work that is still expected from daughter-in-laws half the time. Mother-in-laws, they want to retire, they want to take a backseat. They, of course, can you blame them? I mean, if that was my life from the age of 16 up until 50 something, if I was working that much and so hard every single day of my life, of course I want to retire. Like, I am not going to do all of this forever. You know, I would definitely retire, but that often translates to mother-in-law not wanting to do anything at all. Often translates to mother-in-law getting upset. For instance, the floor hasn't been hoovered today. Mother-in-law gets upset, and you know, this, to her, she thinks the daughter-in-law should do these things, when actually her belief is instilled into her from her own experiences for when she was with her in-laws. Everyone should help each other. That is my basic belief, okay? It doesn't matter if you're a daughter-in-law, it doesn't matter if you're a mother, it doesn't matter if you're the son, it doesn't matter if you're the father-in-law, it doesn't matter if you're the sister. Everybody helps, okay? Everybody does their share of the housework. We're all living together in one house, and everyone should contribute. There should be a system in the house where the daughter-in-law is not doing everything. You cook dinner, mother-in-law cooks lunch. You clean the downstairs area, mother-in-law cleans the upstairs area. You do the washing sometimes, mother-in-law does the washing sometimes. You do the child rearing sometimes, mother-in-law does the child rearing sometimes. And of course, get everyone else in the household to contribute as well. Husband helps out sometimes as well when he's off work. Sister-in-law helps out as well. You know, it's not the daughter-in-law doing everything, but unfortunately, this is the expectation these days. And what makes it worse, actually, is now women have to work as well. So back then, women were doing all of this, all of these chores, household duties, but they didn't have to do anything else. That's all they had to do. And after some time, you would probably get really good at doing that, and it becomes more efficient, and you know, you could find up ways where you can free up time for yourself. But when you are a working woman, on top of doing housework, on top of hosting guests, on top of massaging your mother-in-law's feet, because back then, a lot of the work wasn't just housework as well. It was also catering to your mother-in-law's needs, you know, not just your husband's needs, but your mother-in-law had needs too. For example, sometimes she wanted you to wash her hair, or she wanted you to massage her feet, or, you know, she wanted your time, you know, in some form of way, your effort, your life and soul. And it's just not possible. It's not possible to be the perfect daughter-in-law, yet go out and work and then come home and pay the bills. It's just not gonna happen. So from the get-go, there should be a system. And what I would tell most women as well, to avoid themselves falling into the trap of doing everything, is don't do everything, okay? Someone asks you to do something, do it, but don't feel like you have to come in a room and start cleaning instantly because it's messy and because your mother-in-law's standing there looking at the mess and giving you subtle, you know, body language, which translates to clean this up. Don't have to do it. Act like you don't know what she's saying, act like you don't know what she's doing. It's, at the end of the day, you're not a slave, and you will not be pressured into generational slavery just because your mother-in-law went through it and she had a harder time than you, so now you should do it too. And I know we have appliances. I know things are easy as well to do nowadays. We don't have to complain like our mother-in-laws did of breaking our backs and waking up sore everywhere. But it doesn't make it any easier now that we have to work. Life is still hard. It's still hard for women. And I would argue it's even harder than it is for the men, because men work and that's all they do. Especially in the South Asian culture, women work and do housework and rear kids and look after the in-laws. And in my opinion, it's not a way. It's not a way to live where a woman is sacrificing every single part of her just so she can live. You know, there has to be some humanity and there has to be some fairness. And, you know, as something, as women, when we grow up and, you know, we have our own daughters, we don't want them to end up in this position. We don't want them to be, you know, enslaved by their in-laws. So don't do everything and learn to say no. I will make videos talking about saying no, but slowly, as you go along in your life living with in-laws, you will find it, or even not even living with in-laws, dealing with in-laws, you'll find it easier and easier to stand up for yourself and say no. So that's all I have time for today. These 3 topics, all looped within this heading of generational trauma and how it trickles down into modern joint family living arrangements. I hope you guys found this video interesting, and yeah, I'm gonna try and post more on this channel. I haven't posted in here for so long, and I'm still living with my in-laws. I'm having a great time and I hope you guys are as well. So thanks for watching.